Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1976 science fiction fantasy drama, The Man Who Fell to Earth. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to Dark Metal Spider for requesting this review. And if there's another review of a film that you would like to see me discuss in the future, or a TV show or a topic, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below, and I'll try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Now, The Man Who Fell to Earth is a film that is considered by many to be a cult classic, and I get it in some capacity. In other ways, kind of not so much, because I wasn't a really big fan of this film. There were things about it that I absolutely adored and admired. David Bowie and his performance, the just stunning direction and cinematography, and some of the other aspects of the script or the film. But as a whole, I just found it to be a little too cold, a little too distant, and kind of dull because of how repetitive a lot of it was. But it's still an interesting watch for sure. It's directed by Nicolas Roeg, and I definitely would say this is one of his better films, but I absolutely did prefer other films in his filmography, or I do prefer, like Don't Look Now, which he did in 1973, or one of his other films that he's more well known for, The Witches from 1990. I would probably say that's my favorite film of his, is The Witches. His direction in this, though, it's pretty solid. There are some times where it's absolutely spectacular. When it comes to showcasing the city and just the various different settings throughout the film. Um, this movie really does shine when it comes to the direction and the visuals. There's some really trippy visuals, some really eerie moments. There's also some moments of very ethereal, very surreal. Um, the shots of the alien planet were honestly pretty amazing, showcasing the arid, desolate wasteland of the planet. And yeah, it's just a really nice looking film. Good selection of different types of shots. Good movement of the camera. Things aren't too static. There are some really impressive establishing shots. There are some nice moments where the camera will pan, or will zoom, or will zoom out, or will, do a trick for the eyes. So yeah, Nicholas Roeg did a really solid job directing it. Now, the screenplay, on the other hand, I don't think it shines as brightly as the direction by Roeg. The script is by Paul Meyersberg, and it's based on a novel of the same name by Walter Tevis. And there are some moments where it definitely does have some bright spots. I think one of them is the ambiguity of Newton, the alien visitor, and how the script doesn't give away too much too early. And I think there are some other intriguing aspects of it, like the fact that Newton uses his alien knowledge to create a new corporation, to create these new inventions that are more convenient and more effective technological replacements for things that already exist in society, like the camera and so on and so forth. And just seeing what kind of tech that Newton is allowing the public to get access to is fascinating. The relationship that initially starts to form between Newton and this human woman, Mary Lou, That is also a really strong aspect of the script. It's a great example of a relationship that is doomed and has all kinds of issues, but it's a relationship that really does showcase that despite all of the red flags, despite all of the things that would really point to this relationship being futile, it's something that Mary Lou isn't able to fully let go of, even after she eventually settles down and marries someone else many, many years later. It just shows how deep the connection is in these type of relationships and how difficult it is for people to fully separate themselves from a relationship of this particular kind. And there's some other bits that were kind of intriguing. The reveal of Newton's alien form, that was definitely really strong and striking. And what it was trying to do in terms of showing how he became disillusioned and just even more distant, honestly as distant as his home planet and his real family are as the film went on, was rather effective. Definitely a good showcase of just how quickly one can become disillusioned by society, by its ills, and by its vices, because ultimately he gets addicted to alcohol and he becomes, in a lot of ways, just like any other average Joe, despite the fact that he's an alien from outer space. His blue eyes are even fused to his alien eyes. His human eyes are the only eyes that anyone will ever see because of a mishap that happened during an X-ray that fused the fake eyes to his eyeballs, and so he's left having to live the rest of his days as something he's not. And he has money and he has potential influence, but because of how much of an outsider he is in human society, none of that really is helping him that much. In fact, it's enabling him to continue to spiral even further down into the depths of depression. And it just shows that you can be an alien from outer space, and society can still bring you to your knees. And so there's some compelling stuff, with that. And definitely sparks some interesting debates about what we would do if an alien visitor did arrive to Earth and did take on the guise of a human and gave us all this technology and all of these advancements. And all he wanted in return was to just go home. And we didn't allow him to do that. It's an interesting debate where it's like, why? Why did we not allow him to do that? And it's because of greed. It's because of, one of the most paramount human evils. And it's something that makes a lot of sense. Like, think about it. If this was actually based on a true story, or if anything like this actually did occur in the future, it would probably play out almost the same way. The alien would get fame, he would get fortune, he would get all the money he needs to build his spacecraft, but then there would be somebody who would want to take advantage of him, so they would set things up where he would get captured, and then they would be able to take over his company and take over his technology and and get all the riches while this alien rots away in a hidden room somewhere. And other people get to enjoy the fruits of his labor and the spoils. Like, that's definitely something that we would do, as off putting as that is. And you're probably wondering, oh, I'm mentioning all these things that are good about this script, so why does it not shine so bright? And the reason for that is that you don't really feel as much sympathy for Newton as I think honestly the script could have. Even though you have stuff with him and his family, you don't really necessarily see a lot to really understand why he even left is the planet to begin with, let alone the sheer amount of compassion that he has for his family back home. Like he talks about it, but you don't really feel it. And you see some flashbacks, but they just don't really resonate as strongly. And I definitely do feel that the script is hurt by the lack of a concrete antagonist. Because you think like it might be going one way with Buck Henry's character, Farnsworth, but then that's not really where things go. Ultimately, it's Mr. Peters, Bernie Casey's character, who is technically, I guess, the antagonist, but he's not really an antagonist until like I think over an hour and a half into the movie. So there's not a prime antagonist other than society itself and its ills. And so that makes things a little bit of a slog. And the script also has a really bad concept of time, especially the passage of time. You don't know how much time has passed. It's trying to maybe showcase that or provide information to the audience when it comes to the passage of time by just the way certain characters look, how certain characters are more wrinkled or have some gray hairs. But that doesn't really provide anything other than just a visual template of time passing by. But it's not anything that is particularly clear or concise. So it really makes things just feel even more meandering. And speaking of meandering, like the last half of the movie is just nothing but meandering. The whole scene with the blanks and Mary Lou, that added nothing to the film other than aesthetic value. There, it just feels like things are dragged out, and yeah, the themes of the film are not super complex, but they're definitely very prevalent in society back then and even today. And so that does provide some nice moments of subtext, but it just becomes repetitive after a certain amount of time. So I really feel that this is a concept that probably might have worked best in a short film or part of an anthology or something. Maybe it's not really something that works as a fully fleshed out feature film because there's really not a lot of consistent, engaging drama here. Other than, oh, is he going to find a way to get back home? That doesn't happen. Okay, is he gonna get back together with Mary Lou? That does happen, but he doesn't love her anymore, and she doesn't really necessarily love him either, at least not on the same level, but they still have a certain amount of affection for one another. So it becomes kind of an enabling sort of relationship, kind of similar to like an addict. And speaking of addicts, Newton gets addicted to alcohol and he's disillusioned and so on and so forth to the point where he even hides his face with his hat in the last frame of the film. But it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, all right, how many more variations of disillusioned outsider can you really get? And when it comes to the government doing experiments and all that kind of stuff, that's also been there, done that kind of storytelling. So it does. It just feels like you have all these really impressive, incredible, grand visuals. You have perfect casting with David Bowie as this alien from outer space. And You just have a film that has some moments where it might provoke some thoughts, but it just it becomes tedious. It becomes slow. It does. It becomes a very meandering journey. Because there's not a lot that is actually happening most of the time, and with the way that the script handles the passage of time, it does the film no favors. So yeah, it's just one of those things where there's some interesting concepts and ideas, but everything just doesn't live up to its full potential, at least for me personally. The cast, though, rises to the occasion and does the best that they can to make everything as sturdy as possible. David Bowie, in one of his first ever acting roles as Thomas Newton, I think it might have been his first role. I think he did a great job, a really grand a performance playing Newton. Just perfect casting. David Bowie at the time was like an actual star child, so it makes sense that he would be cast in this kind of role. And he was already kind of a distant guy, and he felt like he was from outer space. So you have him in this role, and it's just a really nice marriage of a performer's identity and his style with the story and with the film itself. And it's a decent performance. It's very believable. You buy David Bowie as this alien being, and he definitely gave it his all. And he went through a lot. I mean, not just the uncomfortable makeup, where they covered him in latex and put these yellow contact lenses in, but also, I mean, he drank some bad milk and got really sick. Yeah, he was sidelined for a few days after drinking bad milk. And that's not the only thing that was an issue with the production of this movie. I mean, this is it's honestly kind of a minor miracle the film even got finished, because you had Bowie getting sidelined with the bad milk. Film cameras had issues; they got jammed up. There was one scene that was shot in the desert, and the movie crew had to contend with a group of Hell's Angels who were camping in the desert at the time. Bowie also recalls that he was using cocaine, and he doesn't remember a whole lot about the film. And he thinks that he was perfectly adequate for the role because he wasn't of this earth at that particular time. And this is a quote from him. I just threw my real self into that movie as I was at the time. It was the first thing I'd ever done. I was virtually ignorant of the established procedure of making movies. So I was going on a lot on instinct, and my instinct was pretty dissipated. I just learned the lines for that day and did them the way I was feeling. It wasn't that far off. I actually was feeling as alienated as that character was. It was a pretty natural performance. A good exhibition of somebody literally falling apart in front of you. I was totally insecure with about 10 grams of cocaine a day in me. I was stoned out of my mind from beginning to end. And this is his recollection of it, but Candy Clark, his co-star, she remembers things differently. She remembers David saying to Nick Roeg that he didn't do any drugs, or he wasn't going to take any drugs. And Clark says he was a man of his word, and he was clear as a bell. He was focused. He was friendly. He was professional, and he was not under the influence. So I don't really know what the true story is, but I bet it's probably something that's more closer to the middle, like where Bowie might have been on some drugs during some takes, but he was also clear and cognizant and aware and sober in other takes. Um, but I really don't know for sure. But speaking of Candy Clark, she did a remarkable job herself as Mary Lou. Honestly, one of her best performances, and I didn't even know that she was acting in a lot of stuff or in anything when she was this young. Like, I thought she was just an actress who's more known for playing uh, characters later on in her career, like in the Blob remake and so on. But no, apparently not. She was doing roles like Mary Lou way back in 1976, and it was a really difficult role, and I thought she did a remarkable job with it in terms of dealing with the complexities of the character and why she's become so dependent on Newton, and showcasing the character as she ages throughout the years. And Rip Torn is also in this as a doctor, Dr. Nathan Bryce, who gets a lot of underage poontang like I mean, lucky Rip Torn, but it's still kind of something that's kind of weird to watch, especially when that's like a consistent focus of this character for a good chunk of the film early on, is that he's just a rowdy, horny professor at a college. Um, it's a pretty good performance of Rip Torn. Definitely less tongue in cheek than some of his other stuff that he would do later on in his career. Buck Henry's also in this. I remember Buck Henry from SNL from his days in the first few seasons of SNL as a writer and also as a performer in season 5. I think he was also performed a little bit in season 4. And he's good here as Oliver Farnsworth, this guy who is handpicked by Newton to essentially run his organization and his corporation. And he gets fame and he gets fortune, but then ultimately he gets thrown out a window for his troubles because of the fact that he becomes a target. Um, and he's targeted by Bernie Casey's character, Mr. Peters. Bernie Casey's fine for what little he has to work with. You definitely don't like the guy, but you don't really know a whole lot about him other than the fact that he works for the government and he's aware of Newton and his technology and he wants it for himself. And that leads to him setting things up and having Newton captured and killing Buck Henry's character and Buck Henry's partner. And I will say that having a gay relationship in a film at this time and having it written in a way where it's not edgy or trying to be done for laughs, that was really refreshing and felt like just a regular relationship. Um, Bertie Casey though, yeah, I just a it's a decent enough performance. And there's a few other actors and actresses, but I didn't really want to mention really the majority of them because there's really not much to say. It's mostly David Bowie and Katie Clark's film, in all honesty. They're the ones that share the most screen time. The cinematography by Anthony B. Richmond is remarkable. It is just absolutely striking. It's stylish, it's slick, it's stunning. I love the way this film looks with its aesthetic, with the use of lighting and just this is a really great looking film. And I think the cinematography just couples so well with the direction by Nicolas Roeg. It looks very dreamlike. There's also other moments where it's very nightmarish. It's very bleak, just like the desert or the wastelands of Newton's home planet. And it's got some nice editing by Graham Clifford, especially during a lot of the sequences that involve more striking or crazy visuals. The whole scene where David Bowie's character Newton reveals his alien self is edited in a way that's very trippy, very eerie. I was on the edge of my seat, to be honest, during that entire scene, in large part because of the way that it was edited. The music by John Phillips, Yamashita. Um, it's there. It definitely does sound very out of this world and very strange and weird and dissonant. But it's not necessarily particularly super memorable, but it does fit the film well. There's some nice bits of classical music that are thrown in there as well that do fit scenes. Um, and there are some other songs that are featured on the soundtrack that are not by Yamashita or John Phillips. You know, you got Blueberry Hill by Louis Armstrong and uh, yeah, Stardust by Artie Shaw and a Bing Crosby song. But there's no David Bowie music, which I was really surprised by. I was honestly shocked that there was no music by Bowie that was used for the film itself. Seemed like a really big missed opportunity. Because I think something like Major Tom, and I think Major Tom might have come out after this, so I don't know exactly what the timeline is. And and maybe David Bowie didn't even sing Major Tom. I could be getting that confused with some other artist, but you could have had a song like that, or something similar to that, or what they used for the Temp score, the Temp soundtrack that they used for the film after they finished shooting it was Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, and I think that would have been really cool to have gotten the licensing rights or whatever to be able to use Pink Floyd's album as the soundtrack for this movie. I think it probably would have fit the film fairly well. This is a very trippy film to begin with, and I think that might have elevated it a little bit more than what songs that they had in the soundtrack. I know there was a American version of the film that was cut, and there were scenes that were rearranged. The Mary Lou segment with the guns that was shot out that was cut entirely. It was something that was sliced right out of the film for the American cut. I could kind of see why, because this really doesn't really add a whole lot to the movie to me. I know some people might argue some sort of subtext about it in terms of how the relationship between Newton and the girl Mary Lou is destructive, and they're killing each other, and so on and so forth. I get it, but it's just not really something that I feel adds a ton to the movie, except to extend the running time. And I think there's a lot of stuff that just feels like padding. So I haven't seen the American cut, but it if it's just rearranging some scenes to kind of help the pacing or cutting some things out, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. But I still haven't seen the cut, so I don't really know whether or not it's something that works. I know a lot of fans of this film don't like that version because they feel that it kind of butchers the vision of Roeg and everyone involved with the movie. But I don't know. I haven't seen it. Um, yeah, it's one of those things where I think it does feel too long. And I think in a lot of ways it's because of the fact that it just becomes repetitive in terms of the themes and the subtext, and it's not as consistent or as engaging of a narrative as it could be. Like if it had a prime main antagonist of some sort that it could have potentially focused on throughout the film, or just trim some things or cut a few things out. But at the end of the day, even though it's a film that ultimately I wasn't a huge fan of, I didn't mind it. It was interesting. It was definitely worth at least one watch for the visuals, for David Bowie's performance. And anyway, I don't really know what else to say about The Man Who Fell to Earth, except thanks for watching my review. And until next time, I'll see you later.